You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday the 16th of December 2013. Benefits cheat stole £82,000 while her husband ran a £400,000 a year Tandoori restaurant. BBC accused of losing all proportion over Mandela's death after dedicating 100 programmes about him in just 1 week. Apologists for paedophiles, a very old Harman pie. Dismantle the euro, says Nobel-winning economist who once backed currency union. Golden Dawn protests against mosque in Athens, Greece. Italian pitchforks are gaining momentum. China lands on the moon. Historic robotic lunar landing includes first Chinese rover. US complains to China after warships narrowly avoid collision. USA Homeland Security employee who called for mass murder of whites finally fired. Thought for the day. Money makes the world go round, the world go round. Yep. And finally, how to avoid the flu. UK news. Benefits cheat stole £82,000 while her husband ran a £400,000 a year Tandoori restaurant. Johora Begum spent £130 a time at the hairdresser's despite wearing a burqa. She also splashed out on Burberry clothes and designer handbags. Claims she had no idea that her husband owned a successful restaurant. Said she didn't know parents owned homes she claimed housing benefit for, and her husband was due to be sentenced also but failed to turn up at court. BBC accused of losing all proportion over Mandela's death after dedicating 100 programmes about him in just 1 week. The BBC has been accused of losing all proportion in its coverage of Nelson Mandela's death after it emerged more than 100 programmes had been broadcast about him in the past week. A total of 1,834 viewers and listeners have complained as the airwaves continue to be flooded with tributes, disrupting radio and TV schedules. MPs castigated the corporation for wasting money as it was revealed bosses spent thousands of pounds sending 8 staff to Johannesburg for a special edition of Question Time. According to an analysis by the Daily Mail, a total of 104 special programmes devoted to Mandela have been aired on the BBC's main radio and TV channels by the time of his funeral. The news of his death has also topped almost every news bulletin for a week, dominated current affairs shows such as Newsnight, and has been screened almost continuously on BBC News 24. World at 8, frankly I couldn't have cared less what they did with this guy's body. Leave it out to feed the wildlife would be a very good thing. Apologists for paedophiles, a very old Harman pie. The Daily Mail over the weekend would have us believe that Labour connections to paedophiles were news. They told us how Labour Deputy Harriet Harman, her shadow minister husband and former Health Secretary Patricia Hewitt are all linked to a group lobbying for the right to have sex with children. Magpie magazine distributed in the late 70s to members of PIE. PIE is a paedophile information exchange, the name of a far-left lobby group. Called for legislation of child sex and age of consent to be lowered to 4. Emerged this week, Labour government at the time may have helped finance the organisation and the Magpie. Home Office now ordered a thorough independent investigation into claims. Hewitt Harman and husband Dromi encountered the PIE as young officials in the National Council for Civil Liberties. The only thing wrong with their story is that we, the BNP and other concerned citizens and alternative news sources have been reporting this story for years and no one listened. So the Daily Mail and Guy Adams did not get any brownie points for this story, or maybe that is the point. World at 8. As we say, we nationalists have been telling this story for years. By the way, I was chucked out of the brownies for conduct unbecoming. Guess what it was? And this was in the days before political correctness. I wouldn't bow down to grey owl, why should I? But it was a papier-mâché owl for God's sake. A man who stuck bacon to the handles of an Edinburgh mosque has been jailed for 10 months. Wayne Stillwell, 25, also threw rashers of bacon into the place of worship but was later caught when he was identified on CCTV. His actions at the Central Mosque in Potterrow were described as grossly offensive by a sheriff. Stillwell admitted breach of the peace and was jailed for the January 31st offence when he appeared at Edinburgh Sheriff Court yesterday. Faisal Chowdhury, chairman of Edinburgh Lothian Regional Equality Council, today welcomed the jail term given to Stillwell and called on all religions to be respected. Speaking after sentencing, Mr Chowdhury said, "I really welcome the sheriff's decision to impose a jail sentence in this case. We live in what is always called a multicultural society, and I think we need to work together and prove that is true. We need to respect everyone's religion or culture, whatever it may be. Hopefully a sentence like this will act as a lesson to show people that all religions need to be respected." Following the attack, Stillwell admitted to police officers that he was aware his behaviour could cause offence. Sentencing on Stillwell, an inmate at the city's Sowton jail, has been deferred by Sheriff Gordon Liddell to obtain reports about the offender's character, but the sheriff told Stillwell that the court had no other option and that a prison sentence was inevitable. Defence solicitor Matthew Nicholson yesterday told the court that his client was sorry for his crime and accepted that he would be going to prison. Mr Nicholson added he fully realises that he will receive a custodial sentence. World at 8. So much for respecting other religions. Why should we when they don't? No one respecting another religion, especially the main religion of a strange country, would build religious edifices everywhere, buy up land and buildings and turn them into places of worship for their people, and have the nerve to talk about respect. This guy should not be given a custodial sentence for this prank, especially when visiting a petrol station in Essex there was a Christmas tree unadorned standing next to an Asian food bar. Is this respecting our religious festivals? European news. Dismantle the euro, says Nobel-winning economist who once backed currency union. A Nobel-winning economist will on Thursday withdraw his support for the euro, saying it has created a lost generation of unemployed youngsters and should be broken up. Sir Christopher Pissarides, who was once a key proponent of a single currency, but will on Thursday accuse the euro of dividing Europe and say action is needed to restore the euro's credibility on international markets, and that the trust Europe's nations once had in each other, according to the Daily Mail. Speaking at the London School of Economics, where he teaches, Professor Pissarides will say the euro should either be dismantled in an orderly way or the leading members should do the necessary as fast as possible to make it growth and employment friendly. Golden Dawn protests against mosque in Athens, Greece. Supporters and members of the Greek party Golden Dawn attended a marching protest against the construction of a mosque in central Athens. 13 years after the project was announced by the Greek government, an architect for the construction of the mosque has finally been chosen. 5 previous attempts to find an architect were halted due to reactions of Greek Orthodox Christians. In order to pray, the Muslim community is currently forced to use apartments. The construction of a mosque will provide the Muslims of Athens with an appropriate and safe environment in which to worship. The mosque will be constructed without a minaret in an attempt to minimise the reaction amongst Christians. World at 8. Frankly, I couldn't give a damn where the sods pray. It should be, however, in their own countries, not ours. Italian pitchforks are gaining momentum. The past week has seen 4 days of rallies and protest actions across the country by the Forconi or pitchforks. The name derives from the movement's roots amongst struggling farmers in Sicily who in 2011 and 2012 staged strikes and roadblocks to demand more help from the government. Ventimiglia on the Italian-French border is the latest place to be hit by the so-called pitchfork anti-government protests which have spread across Italy. Police fired tear gas and clashed with demonstrators on what was the 4th day of rallies. The Interior Minister Angelino Alfano warned Parliament the unrest could lead to a spiral of rebellion against national and European institutions. In Rome, hundreds of students took to the streets outside a university where government ministers were attending a conference. "Our university isn't a catwalk for those who peddle austerity," read the banner. Larger demonstrations are planned in the capital this week. World news. China lands on the moon. Historic robotic lunar landing includes first Chinese rover. China has landed its first robotic landing on the moon, a historic lunar arrival that makes the country only the third nation to make a soft landing on Earth's celestial neighbour. China's Chang'e 3 moonlander and its U-2 rover touched down on the moon Saturday, December 14th at about 1:11 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, though it was late Saturday night local time at the Missions Control Centre in Beijing during the landing. It is the first soft landing on the moon by any spacecraft in 37 years. World at 8. Wonderful what UK money can do, isn't it? Out of the UK, that is. US complains to China after warship narrowly avoid collision. The US government has complained to Chinese officials after one of its guided missile cruisers was forced to avoid a collision with a Chinese warship in international waters in the South China Sea earlier this month. The Chinese People Liberations Army PLA Navy vessel had tried to get the USS Cowpens to stop, according to military officials quoted in the Stars and Stripes newspaper. "I don't know the intent of the guys driving the PLA ship," one US official told the paper. "I just know he was moving to impede and harass the Cowpens." USA Homeland Security employee who called for mass murder of whites finally fired. A Department of Homeland Security employee who called for the mass murder of white people has finally been fired over 4 months after it first emerged that he was running a website which advocated a genocidal race war. Back in August it emerged that Io Kimati had been making $115,000 a year in his job as an acquisitions officer for immigration and customs enforcement, a position he's held since 2009. The DHS first received complaints 2 years ago that Kimati was behind the racist website, and his former supervisor told the Southern Poverty Law Centre that everybody in the office is afraid of him and are worried he will come in with a gun someday and go postal. World at 8. It's ironic that while the Department of Homeland Security circulates training guidelines and material that instruct their employees to treat liberty lovers and constitutionalists as terrorists, actual domestic extremists can remain in jobs with the agency for years whilst publicly spewing violent racial hatred. But of course, like us, the US have had to fill their quotas of coloured ethnics because of political correctness and multicultural diversity. In fact, this aids more immigrants and worse racial relations in a country, and we should know. Thought for the day: money, 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 shekels, lucre, whatever. Now, more than ever, money makes the world go around, and also, more than ever, the populations of countries that have always instilled in their cultures money and the love of money reign supreme. And it is the love of money which is, of course, the root of all evil. Now, I'm not preaching as the converted. My sense of money, for just money's sake, is sadly lacking, and that's why I'm not a wealthy woman today. Probably not even hilariously or maniacally happy one either. But while sitting on the sidelines, I have been watching my country and its people especially change in ways that even I could not envisage. I'm reminded of the film Cabaret, in which Lisa and Joel sang that lovely song, "Money makes the world go round, the world go round, the world go round," whilst Germany was changing around them, to that lovely clinking, clanking sound. Now shekels, lucre and lolly delineate our everyday life, thoughts, habits, and we are all just figures on paper for profit or loss, or simply to make money out of. This is strange when we live in the only country in the world that gives its people money for not doing anything other than just exist or be born. Now, I'm not talking about some countries in Europe where the old age pensioners have a much higher standard of income and living than ours. Pensions have been hard hit in the UK and other parts of the EU because we, and I mean us, the voters, have voted in various parties that seem to care not a jot for us, and I mean the indigenous English Brits, who have lived and worked in this country all our lives. But we must be to blame because our public seem to think that by not voting they will get what they need or want, and of course this is not true. By not voting for a specific party or voting for an independent, you are losing your vote. And my reasoning is that if you don't vote or don't think about who you're voting for, you and others have created the society you now live in and no doubt moan about. Unlike poor old Greece, Spain and Italy, England is still worth something, which is why the Chinese and Arabs are still being encouraged to buy up anything and everything within this linked island. And let's face it, both these cultures were born with an abacus strapped to their rear ends. We were an island with an island's view of survival, which has sufficed for thousands of years. Maybe not with the culture of imperial China or the hanging gardens of Babylon, but it sufficed and has served us well. We are now, as well as the rest of Europe, struggling to overcome massive immigration to our shores, and with the well-worn charity aspect of our politicians, which never starts at home, we on this island are paying huge amounts of money to strangers abroad for what is virtually blackmail. We pay huge amounts for our energy sources, mainly to foreign-owned or franchised corporations. We pay money to countries who are jihadi based to stop them from attacking us. We pay the EU exorbitant amounts of money every day just to exist, with the laws which they dictate for other countries to rule us. We allow other countries in Europe to overfish and use our old territorial waters, and our farmers are enthralled to a government that cares not a jot for self-sufficiency or decency within the farming industries, and promotes massive corporations and supermarkets to take over completely. And now, to add to the general whammy of overseas aid and foreign aid, we, that is you, me and Mr Brown next door, are paying the sodding Chinese government £27 million in 2012 as aid, when China is the second biggest economy in the world. We are truly going bonkers when our own people are being persecuted financially at every titch and turn. We have health cutbacks, council cutbacks, private sector work cutbacks, pension cutbacks, educational cutbacks, and the wonderful idea from Nadim Zahawi, a pal of Cameron, of stopping benefits for families with over 2 children. I would trust this possible law doesn't include the massive amount of Muslim families living mainly on benefits and with huge amounts of wives and children who all, I would imagine, are classed as more than 2 kids. But perhaps they apportion 2 children to each wife and therefore avoid this ruling should it come to pass. If this suggestion is brought into being, it is aimed at white, working, middle-class families who are already hit hard and probably trying to pay mortgages as well. It won't hit the immigrant families with more than 2 children because they will find a way of going around it with either old relatives that need caring for or some wheedle from the DWP or whatever. After all, they've been at it a long time over here and know all the lies. And I wouldn't trust any new ruling suggested by a Muslim on principle. Neither would it affect the thousands of foreign students of whom it is said go home owing millions of pounds in university fees and awards. Firstly, I'm all for them going home. Unfortunately, more than a few stay on and take jobs from our own students. If they stay, they should be subjected to different rules, as they can be called a flight danger going back to their own countries, owing vast amounts of money to our government. In short, you and me and us. Most of our English students used to have an award, I believe, which is now called a loan. My youngest received an award years ago because I wasn't earning enough and his father had died and therefore was not contributing to his education. Otherwise he would never have gone to university. I always thought that foreign students were encouraged to come over because they paid cash up front. So how does this award or loaning apply to would-be students not born here? It is probably all part of the "we shall pay for the whole world before we look after our own" mantra, so common throughout the UK and Europe today. Are our universities so desperate to get bums on seats that they are pushing the boundaries of money, or is it a diversity ethic gone wrong? It is money ethic gone wrong, as always. We have turned most of our colleges, polytechnics and further learning places into universities, which require more funding and more upkeep than previously thought. So they've been encouraging foreign students because that was thought multiculturally and financially sound, but like all things not thought out, it has backfired and we are paying for it. Remember, whilst we are paying £300 per household, which probably doesn't include huge amounts of immigrant households, to the world's poor, our own poor are suffering. We gave China £27 million in so-called aid, which has just enabled them to get a robot on the moon and buy half our country out. Britain gives more foreign aid than any other G8 country, and we are the smallest. Amongst the ridiculous payments of £500 million to fund a programme to stop malaria, which in short promotes yet more people to come over to the UK, and a Turkish television channel. We give most of the nearly £12 billion a year aid to higher income countries like China, Russia, Brazil, Iceland and Barbados, as does the EU. Brussels, which means us, gives £30 million to China and gives half of its aid budget of £10 billion to China and Russia. Meanwhile, we are educating, giving free healthcare, benefits, housing and jobs to the millions of foreign immigrants of all ethnicities that are coming from those aided countries to our country. So in truth, we are giving away all our money double. And for what? Nothing is what. Meanwhile, our cancer sufferers have the lowest percentage of survival rates in Europe. We have the lowest standard of living amongst our poor in Europe. Our pensioners likewise. Our education standards have slipped well below the norm in Europe. Our culture, history and religion are all suffering from what is in effect lack of money. Our young are hedonistic and lazy, and our middle class is too busy shopping at IKEA and Asda to know what is going on beyond the latest Britain's Not Got Talent. And all are in short feeding money into the large black pit that is government, corporations and banks, all of which appear to be either in the EU or China. In short, not only are we culturally bereft, but soon we will be third world culture, or rather lack of it, and we've brought this on ourselves. The great British public scan their papers and don't listen to anything they don't want to hear. Education and knowledge are scorned as our standards that we once held dear. We will have to turn back the clock and gain some old rules, otherwise we will not survive. We are being attacked not only from outside influences, but from our very own government. England's finances need to be curtailed and sorted, and soon. Every politician's job is to make sure his people are looked after before strangers. That is the law of nature and should be obeyed without exception for a relatively prosperous and thriving country. There is talk of leaving the EU, and I for one am keen to do so, but we must not lose the idea of a united Europe, as we need Europe. We just do not need a German Europe or a French Europe. We don't need a so-called union that takes from us and only gives back to the rest of the world and not its members. We need a new, united, nationalist-backed union of Europe, and we need it quickly, and we need it on the ashes of the old EU. There can be no living without rules and laws. That is anarchy and is despised by me for one. I am no economist to be sure, but as Dickens says, earning 20 shillings a week and spending 19 is happiness, earning 19 shillings and spending 21 is misery, or some such saying, and he was right. All the billions of pounds sent out of this country should be stopped, and stopped now. Remember that when you vote, if you can get out of your bed to do so. Don't vote and you lose the right to comment, and that should be a rule. And finally, how to avoid the flu. Eat right. Make sure you get your daily dose of fruit and veggies. Take your vitamins and bump up your vitamin C. Get plenty of exercise because it builds your immune system. Walk for at least an hour a day. Go for a swim. Take the stairs instead of the lift, etc. Wash your hands often. If you can't, keep a bottle of antibacterial stuff around. Get lots of fresh air, open doors and windows whenever possible. Try to eliminate as much stress from your life as you can and get plenty of rest. Or take the doctor's approach. Think about it. When you go for a flu shot, what do they do first? They clean your arm with alcohol. Why? Because alcohol kills germs. So, I walk to the pub. Exercise. I put lime in my vodka. Fruit. Celery in my Bloody Mary. Veggies. Drink outdoors on the patio. Fresh air. Tell jokes and laugh. Eliminate stress. Then I pass out. Rest. The way I see it, if you keep your alcohol levels up, flu germs can't get you. Remember, a shot in the glass is better than one in the arse. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynne Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.